The story of Dr. Donald Klein is one of deception, betrayal, and the abuse of power within the trusted world of fertility medicine. Dr. Klein, a fertility specialist from Indiana, secretly inseminated his patients with his own sperm over the course of decades, without their consent or knowledge. The case came to light only in recent years due to the rise of home DNA testing, revealing the disturbing truth about Klein's actions and their far-reaching consequences. Dr. Donald Klein was a well-respected fertility doctor in Indianapolis, Indiana. During the 1970s and 1980s, he helped many women struggling to conceive by offering what was then considered innovative fertility treatments. To his patients, he appeared kind and trustworthy, an expert who could help them achieve the dream of having children. However, unbeknownst to these women, Dr. Klein was engaging in a shocking betrayal. In dozens of cases where patients believed they were receiving sperm from anonymous donors or their own husbands, Klein was using his own sperm to inseminate them. For decades, this secret remained hidden. In 2014, Jacoba Ballard, a woman who had been conceived through fertility treatment, took a home DNA test out of curiosity. Ballard had always known that she was conceived through donor insemination, but what she discovered would change her life. The test results revealed that she had several half-siblings, far more than would be expected if a donor had followed standard practices, which usually limit the number of children born from a single donor's sperm. Ballard began reaching out to these half-siblings, and as they compared their stories, they realized they had something in common. Their mothers had all been treated by Dr. Donald Klein. At first, it seemed impossible that Klein could be responsible for so many half-siblings. But as more people took DNA tests, the number of half-siblings kept growing. As Ballard and other half-siblings began to piece together the evidence, they realized that something deeply unethical had taken place. They contacted a local news station, which started investigating Klein's practice and his former patients. In 2015, Dr. Klein, then retired, was confronted by his former patients and their children. At first, he denied the allegations, claiming he had never used his own sperm. However, as more evidence came to light, particularly DNA results confirming his biological connection to dozens of children, he was forced to admit the truth. It was revealed that between the late 1970s and the mid-1980s, Klein had inseminated his own sperm into patients without their knowledge or consent. He fathered at least 94 children, a number that continues to grow as more DNA tests are taken, making this one of the largest known cases of fertility fraud in history. The discovery of Klein's actions led to widespread outrage and a call for justice. However, one of the most shocking aspects of the case was that there were no specific laws in Indiana at the time to prosecute fertility fraud. In fact, while Klein's actions were considered morally reprehensible, they were not clearly illegal under the existing laws. Klein was ultimately charged not with fertility fraud but with obstruction of justice. During the investigation, he had lied to authorities, claiming he had never used his own sperm in fertility treatments. When DNA evidence proved otherwise, he was charged with 2 counts of obstructing justice. In 2017, Klein pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a 1-year suspended sentence, meaning he did not serve any prison time. The outcome of the case left many of his victims, both the children he fathered and the mothers he deceived, feeling outraged and betrayed by the legal system. While Klein's medical license had been retired years earlier, the fact that he faced no significant legal repercussions for his actions prompted calls for legal reform. For the families affected by Dr. Klein's actions, the revelations were devastating. Many of the children conceived through his fertility treatments had grown up believing their biological fathers were anonymous sperm donors or their mothers' husbands. Discovering that their real biological father was Dr. Klein led to profound emotional and psychological consequences. Some of the half-siblings struggled with feelings of identity and betrayal, knowing that their conception had been based on lies and deceit. Others felt anger toward Klein for violating their mother's trust and taking advantage of his position of power as a doctor. The mothers, too, were deeply affected. Many of them had trusted Dr. Klein to help them during one of the most vulnerable times of their lives, when they were struggling to conceive. Learning that he had violated their bodies and their trust in such an intimate and personal way was a profound shock. In the aftermath of the Klein case, Indiana lawmakers moved to address the legal gaps that had allowed Klein to escape serious punishment. In 2019, Indiana passed a new fertility fraud law, making it illegal for a doctor to use their own sperm or egg in fertility treatments without the patient's explicit consent. The law also allowed for civil lawsuits against doctors who engaged in such behavior. The case has also sparked a broader conversation about the lack of regulation and oversight in the fertility industry. Fertility fraud is not a crime in many states or countries, leaving patients vulnerable to unethical behavior. The Klein case has served as a wake-up call, prompting calls for stricter laws and better protections for patients. The story of Dr. Donald Klein is a deeply disturbing example of the abuse of trust and power. Over the course of decades, he violated the bodies and trust of his patients, fathering at least 94 children without their mother's knowledge or consent. The case, which came to light through the power of DNA testing, has had a profound impact on the families involved and has led to important legal reforms. While Klein may never fully face justice for his actions, the legacy of his crimes has sparked a critical conversation about the need for greater regulation and accountability in the fertility industry. For the children he fathered and the women he deceived, the emotional and psychological impact of his betrayal will likely last a lifetime.